Hello everyone and welcome back to 61st Squares Official. Today we are covering one of the most anticipated clashes from round 2 of the Quantbox Chennai Grandmasters 2026, featuring two of the world's strongest players, Alireza Firouzja playing white against a World Champion Gukesh with the black pieces. Firouzja entered this round after winning his opening game, while Gukesh had begun the tournament with a draw. A victory here would give Firouzja the sole lead in the standings, while Gukesh was looking to score his first win in front of the home crowd. The players enter one of the richest openings in chess history, the Closed Ruy Lopez, a battleground where patience, maneuvering, and long term planning are far more important than immediate tactics. So now let's see how the game unfolded. E4, Firouzja opens with the king pawn, immediately claiming space in the center and opening lines for both the queen and bishop. It's an ambitious and classical choice. Now E5, Gukesh responds symmetrically, meeting central control with central control and inviting classical play. Now knight to f3, white develops naturally while attacking the e5 pawn. Now knight to c6, black defends the pawn and develops another piece toward the center. Everything is perfectly balanced. Now bishop to b5, the famous Ruy Lopez. Instead of immediately fighting for the center, white places indirect pressure on the knight defending e5. Now a6, the Morphy defense. Black immediately asks the bishop to decide whether it wants to go. Now bishop to a4, the bishop retreats while maintaining pressure on the knight. Now knight to f6, attacking the pawn. Gukesh develops another piece and attacks the e4 pawn. Both players are following one of the most respected opening systems in chess. Now kingside castling, Firouzja secures his king before beginning active operations. Now bishop to e7, black calmly prepares to castle while removing the bishop from possible tactical ideas involving the knight on c6. Now rook to e1, one of the signature moves of the Closed Ruy Lopez. The rook reinforces the e4 pawn and prepares future central expansion with d4. Now b5, attacking the bishop. Black gains queenside space and drives the bishop again. Now bishop to b3. The bishop retreats through a safe diagonal where it continues eyeing the sensitive f7 square. Now kingside castling. Gukesh completes kingside castling. Both kings are now perfectly safe. Now h3. A small but important prophylactic move. Firouzja prevents any future bishop to g4 ideas, pinning the knight and keeping maximum flexibility. Now bishop to b7. Rather than immediately challenging the center, Gukesh develops the bishop onto the long diagonal where it supports future queenside operations. At this stage, neither side wants to reveal their long-term plans too early. Now d3. Instead of the sharper d4, Firouzja chooses the quieter Closed Ruy Lopez setup. This creates a solid pawn chain and keeps the position strategically rich. Now d6. Black mirrors white structure. Both players now have extremely solid foundations. Now bishop to d2, an uncommon but flexible developing move. The bishop connects the rook, supports possible queenside expansion and prepares future maneuvering. Now knight to b8. This may look strange to newer players. Why retreat a developed knight? In the Breyer variation, this is one of black's key strategic ideas. The knight is heading towards d7, from where it can support both the kingside and queenside while avoiding early exchanges. It's a classic example of improving a piece rather than simply keeping it active. Now a4, Firouzja immediately questions black's queenside pawn chain. If white can undermine the b5 pawn, black's queenside structure may become vulnerable. Now knight b to d7, exactly as planned. The knight completes its journey from b8 to d7, supporting c5 and e5, and also f6 while preparing flexible piece coordination. Now knight to c3, white develops another piece toward the center. The knight also supports future central breaks. Now c6, an important positional move. Black strengthens the d5 square, supports the b5 pawn, and prepares potential expansions with d5 later. At this point, Gukesh is following textbook Breyer strategy. Now a takes b5. Firouzja decides to clarify the queenside tension. Now a takes b5. Gukesh recaptures, although the a file has opened. Black maintains a healthy pawn structure. Neither player has gained any concrete advantage. Now rook takes a8. Firouzja exchanges rooks. Removing black's rook slightly reduces black's queenside activity. Now queen takes a8. Instead of using remaining rook, Gukesh recaptures with the queen. This keeps both rooks connected while placing queen on an active square. The position remains dynamically balanced. Knight to h4. The first ambitious move from Firouzja. Rather than simply improving a piece, the knight heads towards f5, where it could create kingside pressure. This signals that white is beginning to think about attacking chances. Now g6, an excellent defensive response. Gukesh immediately prevents the knight from occupying f5 and limits white's attacking ideas. This also prepares to meet any bishop or queen incursions on the king side. A calm but very accurate move. Now bishop to h6, attacking the rook. Firouzja continues with active piece play. The bishop targets black's rook on f8 and encourages exchanges that might weaken the dark squares around the king. Now rook to e8. Instead of moving the king or creating weaknesses, Gukesh calmly steps the rook away. The rook now supports the important e file while remaining flexible for future defense. Again, black chooses solid positional play over unnecessary complications. Now queen to f3, a very natural attacking move. Firouzja centralizes the queen while simultaneously eyeing both the king side and the center. The queen now works together with the bishop on h6 and hints at ideas involving sacrifices or pressure against the f7. White is slowly increasing the tension. Now bishop to f8, attacking the bishop on h6. Gukesh responds with excellent defensive technique. Rather than allowing white's bishop to remain active, he calmly challenges it and prepares to exchange it. This reduces white's attacking potential without creating any weaknesses. Now bishop takes f8. Firouzja decides to exchange his active bishop for black's bishop on f8. Although white gives up the bishop pair, he removes one of black's key defensive pieces around the king. Now rook takes f8. Gukesh recaptures with the rook instead of the king, keeping his pawn structure intact, and his king is completely safe. The rook on f8 is also well placed to defend along the f file. Now queen to e3, eyeing h6, Firouzja repositions the queen towards the center. From e3, the queen supports both wings and keeps an eye on possible kingside attacks. Now queen to d8. Gukesh calmly centralizes his queen as well. The queen now protects important central squares while remaining ready to support either flank. Both players continue improving their pieces rather than forcing tactics. Now queen to h6. Firouzja again points his queen towards the black king. Even though there are no immediate threats, white is constantly asking black to remain alert. Now knight to c5. An excellent developing move. The knight occupies an active outpost, attacks the bishop on b3 and increases black's influence over the queen side. Gukesh is beginning to seize the initiative. Now bishop goes a2. Firouzja preserves his bishop by retreating to the long diagonal. From a2, the bishop still keeps pressure toward the king side. Now bishop to c8. A subtle but strong move. Gukesh reroutes his bishop to prepare future expansion while also keeping important defensive duties. His pieces are becoming increasingly coordinated. Now knight to f3. The knight returns from h4. Since the attack has not materialized, Firouzja wisely brings the knight back into the game. Now b4, attacking the knight. This is black's first real pawn break. Instead of waiting, Gukesh gains space on the queen side, attacks white's knight and begins creating long-term pressure. This move marks a clear shift from defense to active play. Now knight to d1. The knight retreats to avoid exchanges. Although passive for the moment, it hopes to re-enter the game through e3 and c4. Now queen to a5, attacking the bishop on a2. Excellent queen activity. The queen joins the queenside attack, adding pressure against white's bishop and supporting the advancing pawns. Black's pieces are working together beautifully. Now bishop to c4. Firouzja centralizes the bishop to keep influence over both wings. It also prevents some tactical ideas along the queen side. Now b3, another energetic pawn thrust. Rather than slowing down, Gukesh keeps pushing forward. The advanced pawn restricts white's pieces and creates concrete tactical threats. Black is now dictating the course of the game. Now bishop takes b3. Firouzja finally captures the dangerous pawn. Allowing it to remain would only increase a black's space advantage. Now knight takes b3. Gukesh immediately recaptures with the knight. The exchange removes white's powerful bishop while improving black's knight. Black continues to enjoy slightly easier play. Now c takes b3. White restores material equality. The c pawn recaptures, opening the c file, but also leaving white with an isolated queenside structure. Now queen to b4, a very active queen move. Instead of grabbing material immediately, Gukesh places the queen on an aggressive square where it attacks multiple targets simultaneously. The queen now pressures both the b3 and e4 while restricting white's coordination. Now knight to e3, Firouzja develops his knight toward the center. The knight eyes important squares on d5 and f5 while helping defend the queen side. Now queen takes b3. Gukesh wins a pawn. This is the reward for his excellent queenside play over the last several moves. Black now enjoys a healthy extra pawn and appears to have the more comfortable position. At this stage, the engine also prefers black. Now queen to h4, attacking the knight on f6. Firouzja chooses to keep attacking. However, the engine considers this as an inaccurate move. Stronger move was knight to f1, bringing the knight back toward the king and improving white's defensive coordination. Instead, the queen move allows black to continue consolidating. Now knight to h5. A very practical defensive move. The knight blocks white's queen, protects important dark squares and prepares to challenge any kingside attack. Gukesh has successfully neutralized white's initiative. Now queen to e7. Firouzja activates the queen deep inside black's position. Although black is still better, white is beginning to create tactical possibilities. Now knight to f4. This is Gukesh's first serious mistake of the game. The move looks active, but it allows white to exploit tactical weaknesses. Instead, the engine strongly preferred queen to e6, which would have consolidated black's extra pawn while keeping everything under control. The evaluation swings dramatically. Now queen takes d6. Firouzja immediately takes advantage. White wins an important pawn and suddenly activates every piece. The queen becomes extremely powerful on d6. What looked like a comfortable black advantage begins to disappear. Now knight takes d3, attacking the rook. Gukesh responds energetically. His knight jumps into d3, creating threats against white's rook and central squares. Rather than defending passively, he searches for active counterplay. Now rook to b1, a precise defensive move. The rook protects the b file and prevents black's queen from causing further damage. White's pieces become better coordinated. Now f6. This is another significant mistake from Gukesh. Although it appears to strengthen the center, it weakens black's dark squares and removes important flexibility around the king. The engine preferred h6, maintaining a solid defensive structure. After f6, white's advantage increases substantially. The momentum has completely shifted. Now knight to d2, attacking the queen. Excellent centralization. The knight attacks key squares while preparing to challenge black's active pieces. Firouzja is now firmly in control. Now queen to b5. Gukesh tries to regroup. The queen remains active and keeps pressure on white's queen side. Although still fighting, black is now mostly reacting to white's threats rather than creating his own. Now knight d to c4. Here is a shocking blunder from Firouzja. Instead of consolidating with the rook to a1, Firouzja chooses the natural looking knight move. Unfortunately, this allows black's pieces to become active again. A winning position suddenly becomes nearly equal. This is the first major mistake by Firouzja in the game. Now knight to f4. Gukesh immediately takes advantage. The knight jumps back into an aggressive square, creating threats against white's king and queen. Black is suddenly back in business. Now king to h2. A calm but necessary king move. Firouzja steps away from possible checks and tactical ideas along the g file. The king becomes slightly safer before the next wave of complications. Now bishop to e6, a very logical developing move. The bishop enters the game with tempo, attacks important central squares and prepares to coordinate with the queen and rook. Despite missing early opportunities, Gukesh has completely revised his position. Now rook to c1. Firouzja centralizes his rook onto the c file, onto the open c file. The rook now eyes the c6 pawn and prepares to support future activity along the 7th rank. Despite the time pressure, this is a sensible move that keeps white's pieces coordinated. Now bishop takes c4. This is another major mistake from Gukesh. Instead of maintaining pressure with the stronger rook to f7, black voluntarily gives up his active bishop. The exchange relieves much of white's positional pressure and hands the initiative back once again. This illustrates how difficult it is to find precise moves with only seconds remaining on the clock. Now knight takes c4. Firouzja immediately recaptures the knight. While this looked perfectly natural, the engine points out that rook takes c4 was a much stronger option. By choosing the knight, white misses a chance to build a much larger advantage. Once again, both players overlook the best continuation. Now rook to f7. Gukesh calmly activates his rook. The rook now protects the 7th rank and supports the king and prepares to contest white's active queen. A solid practical decision under severe time pressure. Now rook to c2. Firouzja doubles down on flexibility. The rook protects the 2nd rank and remains ready to swing either to the king side or queen side depending on how the position develops. Now queen to b3. Attacking the rook, Gukesh keeps his queen active by invading the 3rd rank. However, the engine preferred a queen to a4, which would have placed more pressure on white's queen side. Although the queen remains dangerous, black misses another opportunity to improve his position. Now knight to e3, supporting the rook. A very important regrouping move. The knight heads towards stronger central squares where it can defend the king and support future attacks. Firouzja gradually improves the coordination of his pieces. Now king to g7, a useful king move. Gukesh steps away from possible checks and removes his king from tactical ideas involving the back rank. Even in time trouble, king safety remains an important priority. Now queen takes c6. Firouzja wins another pawn. White's queens become increasingly active and material is now balanced once again. This is an excellent practical decision, converting activity into tangible gains. Now queen to b4. Black immediately counterattacks rather than defending passively. Gukesh activates the queen against white's weaknesses. The queen remains black's most dangerous piece. Now queen to c4. Firouzja keeps queens on the board, although the engine preferred knight to c4, which would have improved white's knight while restricting black's queen. The queen retreats slightly, reduces white's advantage. Now rook to b7. Gukesh misses a golden opportunity. The engine strongly preferred simply exchanging queens with queen takes c4, reducing white's attacking chances. Instead, the rook move keeps the complications alive and gives Firouzja additional opportunities. Now queen to c8. Firouzja places the queen aggressively on the 8th rank. The queen now creates threats against black's back rank while supporting possible tactical ideas. Excellent practical pressure. Now rook to f7. Gukesh calmly returns the rook to defend. The rook protects the key entry squares and keeps the position together. Although black remains under pressure, the defensive resources are still holding. Now queen to e8. A huge mistake from Firouzja. The engine preferred g3, strengthening the king and limiting black's knight activity. Instead, the queen move allows black significant counterplay. White lets much of his advantage disappear. Rook to e7, attacking the queen. Incredibly, Gukesh immediately returns the favor. Rather than exploiting white's mistake, he misses the powerful queen to e1, which would have created decisive threats. Instead, black settles for a rook move that allows white to stay in the game. This perfectly captures the chaos of elite time scrambles. Now queen to d8. Firouzja calmly retreats the queen while maintaining pressure on black's position. The queen remains active and continues supporting white's centralized pieces. Now knight to e6, attacking the queen. Gukesh improves the knight. The knight now attacks important central squares while challenging white's queen. Both sides are trying to regroup after missing tactical opportunities. Now knight to d5, attacking the queen and a rook as well. Firouzja jumps into the center. Although active, the engine preferred a queen to d5. Maintaining greater pressure, the knight moves allow blacks to simplify. Now knight takes d8. Gukesh eliminates the powerful white queen. At first glance, losing the queen appears alarming, but white has calculated that the resulting position offers strong compensation through active minor pieces and a favorable endgame structure. The queens are finally off the board. The battle now enters a completely different phase. Now knight takes b4. Firouzja immediately recaptures material. The knight lands on b4, removing black's queenside pawn and becoming an active piece. White's knight is now beautifully placed. Now rook to b7, attacking the knight. Gukesh activates his rook behind the pawns. The rook remains black's main defensive piece and prepares to attack white's queenside from behind. Both players are now focused on endgame technique rather than tactics. Now knight to d5. The knight heads back toward the center. From d5, it controls critical squares on both wings, supports white's advancing pawns. This is an excellent centralization. Now knight to e6. Black develops the knight. However, the engine preferred a rook to b3, placing immediate pressure on white's queenside pawns. Instead, the knight move is slightly passive and allows white to continue improving. Now b4, a very important strategic move. Firouzja creates a dangerous pass pawn on the queen side while gaining space. The pawn also restricts black's rook and knight. White's long-term winning chances continue to increase. Now f5. Gukesh seeks counterplay rather than waiting. He begins advancing his kingside pawns in an attempt to activate his king and create his own pass pawn, a practical decision in a difficult position. Now rook to c6. Firouzja places his rook on an active square. The rook attacks weak pawns, supports the passed b pawn and cuts off black's king. Excellent endgame technique. The rook now attacks the e6 knight. Now king to f7 supports the knight. Gukesh centralizes his king. In rook and knight endgames, king activity is often just as important as material. Black hopes to improve his king before white's pass pawn becomes too dangerous. Now b5. Firouzja continues pushing his queenside majority. If rook takes b5, then rook takes e6, king takes e6 and knight to c7 is winning material. So after b5, Firouzja continues pushing his king's queenside majority. Every pawn advance brings him closer to creating a decisive pass pawn. This forces black to remain constantly alert. Now knight to d4. Excellent defensive play by Gukesh. The knight jumps into the center where it attacks white's rook while controlling important promotion squares, a strong practical resource. Now rook to c7 check. Firouzja checks the king. Although natural, the engine preferred a stronger rook to f6 check, which would have preserved a larger advantage. The rook check allows blacks to simplify. Now rook takes c7. Gukesh immediately exchanges rooks. By eliminating white's active rook, he greatly increases his drawing chances. The game now transitions into a pure knight endgame. Now knight takes c7. Firouzja recaptures with the knight. Material remains balanced, but white enjoys more active king and a healthier pawn structure. Those small advantages will become increasingly important. Now king to e7. Gukesh centralizes his king. With the rooks gone, both kings must become active participants. The knight endgame has officially begun. Now b6. Firouzja immediately advances his passed b pawn. Instead of keeping it on b5, he pushes it one square further, forcing black to deal with a long-term promotion threat. Every move of his pawn limits black's freedom. Now king to d6. Gukesh centralizes his king. Rather than chasing the pawn immediately, the king heads toward the queen side, where it can eventually stop the passer while remaining closer to the center. Excellent endgame technique. Now knight to d5. Firouzja repositions the knight to the powerful d5 outpost. From here, the knight controls critical central and queenside squares while supporting the pass pawn. Now king to c6. Gukesh continues marching toward the queen side. The king now directly attacks the advanced b pawn and hopes to eliminate white's main source of counterplay. Now f3, a quiet but very important move. Firouzja strengthens his center, prepares to support his king's advance and prevent any unwanted knight jumps into e4. Good endgame players often improve their pawn structure before launching decisive operations. Now f takes e4. Gukesh decides to exchange pawns. This opens the position and hopes to create active play for his king and knight. Now f takes e4. Firouzja recaptures immediately. His pawn structure remains healthy and his king now has more open lines to enter the position. Now knight to b3. An active knight maneuver. Gukesh attacks important central squares while keeping an eye on white's queenside pawn. The knight becomes black's main defensive piece. Now king to g3. Firouzja activates his king. This is exactly what a strong endgame technique demands. The king now heads toward the kingside pawns while supporting future advances. Now knight to d2, attacking the e4 pawn. A significant inaccuracy by Gukesh. Although the knight becomes active, the engine preferred a knight to c5, which would have offered much stronger defensive chances against white's pass pawns. This mistake increases white's advantage. Now knight to f6, attacking the h7 pawn. A beautiful centralized knight move. The knight attacks key pawns while controlling important escape squares. White's pieces now dominate the board. Now king takes b6. Gukesh finally captures the dangerous pass pawn. Although eliminating the pawn was necessary, doing so allows Firouzja to shift his attention entirely to the king side. King to f2. Firouzja misses the strongest continuation. The engine preferred much more aggressive king to g4, activating the king immediately against black's kingside pawns. Even so, white still maintains the better position. Now h5. This is the decisive blunder of the game. Instead of maintaining flexibility with h6, Gukesh weakens his kingside structure and gives white the opportunity to invade with the knight. After this move, the evaluation jumps dramatically in white's favor. This is the moment where the game is effectively decided. Now knight to d7 check, at the same time attacking the e5 pawn. Firouzja is not wasting time. The knight delivers a check while forcing the black king into a passive position. The knight is now completely dominating the board. Now king to c7. The king steps away, but black's defensive coordination continues to deteriorate. Now knight takes e5. Firouzja wins another pawn. This is a critical breakthrough. White is now not only but more active but also materially ahead. The knight continues proving far superior to black's. Now knight takes e4 with a check. Gukesh grabs a central pawn with check. Although this creates temporary activity, it is not enough to change the evaluation. Now king to e3. Firouzja calmly centralizes the king. Rather than chasing pawns immediately, he proves the king's position first. Excellent practical play. Now knight to f6. Gukesh retreats the knight to defend remaining weaknesses. Black is now playing almost exclusively for survival. Now knight takes g6. Firouzja collects another pawn. White's material advantage continues to grow. At this stage, nearly all of black's kingside pawns are becoming vulnerable. Now king to d6. The king heads back toward the center. Unfortunately for black, it's already too late. White's king and knight are significantly more active. Now king to f4. Firouzja continues improving the king. The king now directly supports the knight while threatening future pawn captures. Excellent endgame coordination. Now knight to d5 check. Gukesh uses the knight actively, forcing white's king to move. Even in a difficult position, black keeps searching for practical chances. Now king to g5. Firouzja calmly sidesteps the check. The king is now deeply inside black's position. Now knight to e3. Attacking the pawn. The knight attacks from an active square. However, black's remaining pawns are simply too weak to hold. Now knight to f4, supporting the pawn. Firouzja brings the knights back into the center. The knight now attacks several important squares while supporting the king. White's pieces work together perfectly. Now king to e5. Gukesh activates the king one final time. Unfortunately, activity alone cannot compensate for the material deficit. Now g3, a calm improving move. Firouzja secures his king, controls key squares and prepares to advance the kingside majority. Strong endgame players rarely rush. Now king to e4. Black's king remains active, hoping to create tactical complications. Now knight takes h5. Another pawn falls. Firouzja now enjoys a decisive material advantage. The conversion is becoming straightforward. Now king to f3, attacking the pawn. A final inaccuracy. The engine preferred king to e5. Keeping the king closer to the center. Instead, the king drifts towards the king side, allowing white an even simpler win. Now g4. The winning breakthrough. Firouzja begins creating a dangerous pass pawn on the king side while restricting black's king. This move perfectly demonstrates how active pawns and king coordination win knight endgames. Now knight to d1. Gukesh searches for counterplay with the knight. Unfortunately, there is simply no way to stop white's connected pass pawns and active king. Now knight to f6. Beautiful finishing move. The knight dominates key promotion squares while protecting white's advancing pawns. Black has no satisfactory defense. Recognizing that the position is completely lost, Gukesh resigns. A remarkable comeback victory for the French superstar. This victory proved extremely important for the tournament standings. With this win, Alireza scored his second consecutive victory, moving to 2 out of 2 and becoming the sole leader of the Quantbox Chennai Grandmasters 2026 after round 2. Firouzja's resilience under pressure and exceptional endgame technique demonstrated exactly why he remains one of the world's strongest players. This game had everything chess fans could ask for. The opening was a model example of Closed Ruy Lopez with both players demonstrating world-class preparation and strategic understanding. Gukesh gradually took over the initiative on the queen side and even won a pawn through excellent positional play. For much of the middle game, it looked as though the world champion was on course of victory. Once the queens and rooks disappeared, Firouzja demonstrated outstanding endgame technique. His king became increasingly active. His knight dominated the board and he steadily converted his positional edge into a winning material advantage. The decisive moment arrived with h5 on move 58, after which Firouzja's precise play left black with no realistic chances of saving the game. This was a perfect reminder that elite chess is not only about opening preparation and tactical brilliance, it's also about resilience, practical decision making, and flawless endgame execution under immense pressure. If you enjoyed this complete move by move breakdown, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to 64 Squares Official, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our in-depth coverage of the world's biggest chess tournaments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.